Hello and welcome to today's episode of the Artist Collective radio show. Today's episode brings us a much loved singer-songwriter out of Denton, Texas. Chris Flemmons is the founder of the critically acclaimed experimental folk band, the Baptist Generals, which is known for its deeply personal narrative style, often resonating with its listeners on a guttural and emotional level. In 2005, Chris Flemmons planted the seeds for what would become 35 Denton, the hugely successful North Texas counterpart to Austin's South by Southwest, from which he stepped down in 2010. Today, Chris works in production for television and film while still continuing to produce deeply moving, heartfelt songs about love and loss for the Baptist Generals. On today's episode, we catch up with Chris to learn about his process and how it has evolved over the years, some of the challenges he's faced as an artist, and the ways he's adapted to and built upon this creative, beautiful life. Thank you so much for joining us today on the Artist Collective radio show. Chris, it's so great to see you. Thank you so much for being here today as part of the Artist Collective radio show. I'm so glad that you decided to join me today. So part of why I asked you specifically to join me to be on the show is because you and I have had some pretty deep conversations in the past about art and life and the life of being an artist. And so I'm kind of hoping that we can bring some of those past conversations into today, and I can get you to tell us a little bit about your process and some of the good and some of the bad and all the stuff that goes into that. So take me back to the beginning of it for you. Tell me what compelled you towards this creative life, and when and why did you decide to pursue music and television and film production as a career? How'd you break into this beautiful life?
I grew up in a household with a writer, and he was a writer for the Star Telegram for 35 years. And so I grew up in a house, like every time we moved to a new house, we had to hire somebody to like build bookshelves in like 3 rooms. So I grew up like in a library. I always had books around me, and I always got to watch this person work at their craft. And early on, I just never ever thought I couldn't do things. I always felt that I could. There never was a mystery to me, because it was like, I mean, a lot of people go, well, how do you become a songwriter, or how do you do this thing or that? You know, they think there's just some, they live with some sense of like, they see themselves as a fraud. They don't feel legitimate, you know, and like pursuing this stuff. And they wonder when it is that they can call themselves a writer. Does that mean, like, if you're a writer, does that mean that you've actually gotten a book published, that somebody else showed interest in it and backed you on it? I don't necessarily think so. I think you do these things. And anyway, so I didn't grow up with like there being this mystery. This guy worked really hard at what he did.
Yeah.
Now I was interested in film work. I was interested in eventually like directing some films. I was way into documentary filmmaking also, which is something I'm doing right now. But the music thing, the culture of that, for 9 years before I got to Denton for college, I played drums. And the last couple of years before I came to Denton, I'd gotten a classical guitar that I bought for $19 in a pawn shop. It was a Trump guitar, no relation. And and so I'd started to write songs on it, and I wrote a song. And I was messing around with a 4-track machine with a friend of mine, and we recorded one of these songs that I'd written, and we actually had there was a wealthy Jewish man that was uh, uh, investing in publishing. And so we ended up in Arlington at Pantego Studios with this guy, Pantego being where Pantera is birthed out of. And yeah, and worked the owner of the studio was the dad of I think it was Dimebag Darrell. I'm not certain, but
Oh,
yeah, anyway. But he put several $1,000s into a recording with a demo artist of my song. And it was just like, well, this is really strange. I'm like 19 years old, you know, and he
yeah.
was like, you're a really good songwriter. And I was like, well, thanks, you know, but I got into a place with drums where I really didn't like hauling them around. And I was, yeah,
It's a lot of work.
yeah, especially when you're in a VW Bug,
Yeah.
which is what I was.
They're a lot of work in and of themselves. So
Well, we're talking about a 2-door car where you
right.
pull all the seats forward and then anyway put stuff into the back seat, and then there's a trunk up front. It'll take a little bit of stuff besides the spare tire. And anyway, so I was kind of tired of playing drums, and I just started writing stuff more and more on guitar. And then I got here, and my father had heart problems from the time I was about 14 to the time I was 21. And so I got to Denton. My dad had a heart transplant when I was 20 years old.
Oh.
And then he lived for the next 11 years with the heart transplant. He physically never really regained his strength. And when I was 31, he passed away. And he had gotten cancer that lasted for 4 years. But really, so for my 20s, you know, you're in Denton, everybody's playing in a band. And I really didn't have time to do that. I was like in college, and then I started working in film production in Dallas. And then a huge part of my time was taking care of his health, trying to get him back and forth from the medical center in Houston, which is where his doctor was. And so I kind of, my 20s, I didn't quite participate in a music scene the way I would like to. I met people like Will Johnson. I became close friends with Cornmo, John Cunningham, and John Freeman, and became friends with Brent Best from Slaughterbone and the guys from Brutal Juice, you know, but I really wasn't participating that much. I started playing live in about 1996. So I'd been writing songs. It was cathartic for me dealing with the stress of my father's health. I've been writing like from the time I was 20 up until 1996, 97. Slowly, I was getting introduced to people that really liked the music and they wanted to contribute to it. And then by the time my father passed away, we'd been playing shows. We were playing shows in Austin with more influential bands somebody put us on an opener and they'd seen us and they were like, y'all are amazing. You want to come play? And we're like, yeah. But it was kind of start stop, you know? And there was a point when a friend of mine was dating a Dallas Observer music writer. And he gave her, like, we put out a cassette tape in like 1996. And she got it and freaked out about it. We got written up in Dallas Observer. Now, at the time, you got to understand there was no music criticism on the internet. There was barely an internet.
Yeah, I was gonna say
having an alternative weekly that you could read every week, and I mean, we're just talking a paper newspaper.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, we're talking about you go find it at your 7-Eleven every week and open it up and read about the bands that are doing stuff in North Texas. And so we got written about, and I mean, this was this influential other alternative weeklies all over the country read this stuff.
Yeah.
They would go see what's going on in Dallas. Music labels would go see what's going on in Dallas, Houston, Austin, Portland, Athens. Like, yeah, so it was a very different time. And so we had this glowing article written about us. And then all of a sudden we ended up on a label in 1997. In 98, we started talking to a label in Europe. And so we ended up on a label in Europe. Meanwhile, I was real interested in film production. My intention really wasn't to try to make a career out of like playing music. Matter of fact, I thought music was flakier than the film business. And it's still that way. But we ended up going to Europe, and then from there we ended up on Sub Pop Records in the US. And I don't know. And at points I thought about stopping doing this and playing with the band, but you know, we're like over 20 years in now, and
Too far. You're too far in to turn back now.
And things just keep continuing to happen. So
Right.
like we really haven't released a record since 2013, but there's still a lot of people discovering our music. And I've heard other stories about this kind of thing where there are bands that kind of labored in obscurity and a little bit of anonymity, or they were critical darlings, but they never ran it really big, which is kind of the place we've been. We've always people tend to like us, you know, and we're kind of a band's band. We've got friends that are huge, you know, who've written entire soundtracks for major motion pictures and stuff, you know. But it's like, yeah, but I there was a time when I was gonna stop it, but you know, now I don't want to make an album. That's what I was getting at. We made an album in 2013. I just think it's a singles market now. And I don't want to have to write an opus. I think doing singles allows you the opportunity to skip around and try different things and, you know, do different stuff. And that's where we've been like the last 2 or 3 years. We have some new stuff coming out, but I didn't have intentions of doing it. But we have such a good group of folks. We all have our own lives now. We got children and we have other responsibilities, but we still try to manage to get together on occasion and do a live show. And that's what I'm kind of wanting to build more at this point is, I mean, we play in Dallas and Austin when we do get out with each other and play, and in Denton. But I really want to try to build from that and be doing Chicago and the coasts and stuff like that.
Do you think that this is something that you do because there's an audience that wants it, or do you think that you do it because you just have to do it? Which is first, the chicken or the egg in this scenario? Being where you are in life with the families and the responsibilities.
I mean, I have a myriad of jobs that I do just to keep my mortgage and my property taxes paid. You know, I don't. And it's not music, although I mean I would like for that to be that.
Sure.
But we know. I mean, about the time that we ended up on a label was about the time Napster got popular, and so you had this like revenue tank that just didn't allow people to do things.
Everything changed.
Everything changed.
Yeah.
You know? And so now Spotify and all these streamers, you know, there's arguments about rates that people are getting paid. It's a continuing discussion. It seems like there's been a little bit of progress on it in the last year, but yeah, you were asking. I mean, I do this because I like it. At this point, I'm 52 years old. I like being around my friends. We're like family with each other. Yeah, but at the same time, it's nice to incrementally after 20 years have things happen that, you know, make me excited about what we're doing.
So why music? I mean, at 52 you could just hang out with your friends and drink around a campfire or, you know, whatever. So tell me what it is about music that you keep coming back to. Why do you want to put more out there, or how does it feed you while you're giving to other people?
No, it's just a spiritual thing for me. It always has been, you know? I mean, when I started writing music, I did it because I needed some cathartic moment dealing with the stress, dealing with watching a human being's body fall apart, which was, you know, my father's situation. And so it was very, the beginning of the catalog was not exactly upbeat. It was pretty grave, but it was stuff that it was flesh and blood. It was what mattered to me. And if you're asking me like why I still do it, I do get something spiritual out of it. It's kind of my outlet to deal with myself and my own life. And you know, I went from a place where, you know, I can remember a few times we played with some pretty hard rock bands that I had a lot of respect for, and we were still like this kind of they wanted us to open for them, but we were still kind of this acoustic, you know, Violent Films, all acoustic, kind of slow tempo, dirge, kind of real emotional and stuff like that. You know, and we had points where people would send us, they would send us emails, they would send me emails on our website, you know, and they say, you guys suck. You don't rock like the band we opened for. Like they'd gone to the show and you don't rock like, I mean, it was Slobberbone. That was the last time it happened. That was at least like 18 years ago.
That's funny to me.
Yeah, we played at Sons of Herman with Slobberbone, who are huge fans of us, Mutual Admiration Society, but it's like, yeah, they were like, you just don't rock like Slobberbone. And I was like, man, do you really think we're trying to rock like Slobberbone? You know, it's just like, I really don't give a fuck. I don't really care. It just doesn't matter to me. But I mean, we do, we're a little more lathered and spirited, and we've discovered like the MC5 side of the Baptist Generals. Like it's just kind of, quite frankly, balls out when we get on a stage. There's amplifiers mixed with acoustic sounds, and it goes all over the place now. And it took years and years for it to get to that. From the same way the band started out as a two-piece with my guitar and drums, you know, now at points when, like likely when we play again, it's like 8 and 9 people on the stage. And it's a little crazy, which I like, you know.
Yeah.
Because at points people back off and let it be small, and at other points it's just a barrage, you know. So it took a long time to get to that. But yeah, it's still a spiritual experience for me. It's a long way to get to the answer for you, but
no, it's great. I love all of that. We've talked in the past about how artists, particularly songwriters and musicians, are often the mouthpiece for other people who can't necessarily express themselves. And so you have a very profound way of tapping into that emotion that a lot of us, even those who are very emotive, can't necessarily put into such a beautiful lyrical way. And so how does your idea of being a mouthpiece or allowing yourself to be open as a conduit for that emotion to flow, how does that inform your writing songs and what you put out there?
Okay, well, Shoshana, you're being really formal about this, but I know what conversation. You want me to just tell the story?
Oh, it's up to you.
Exchange? Okay, I mean, okay, so here's.
I mean, we were having pancakes and whatnot, but I mean, I'm just saying, like, it's an overall viewpoint of, like, sometimes, you know, artists have to do the hard work that sometimes other people just can't. But you put it into your words.
No, I'll go ahead and put it in my words because I'll just share it with your audience. Like, I mean, Shoshana used to live in Denton before she was married. She dated a very close friend of mine, John Cunningham, Cornmo, and we'd go to breakfast every Sunday. And the 9/11 thing had happened, and all of my friends had quit their stockbrokering jobs and all the pharmaceutical salesmen, one got a psychology degree and then all of a sudden was working for a pharmaceutical salesman selling psych drugs. And I was like, you evil woman. Like, I can't believe you're like doing this. You got a psychology degree to like be helping people. And anyway, all of them quit their jobs. Like after 9/11, it became a moment, kind of like what we've dealt with the pandemic, where they're like, I got to change my life. And so, yeah, a lot of them went into like emergency management, and some of them went to South America, to do volunteer work, as rescue, in organizations. And it was really meaningful. Meanwhile, I'm just this guy playing in a band at like 26 years of age, maybe, and I was just like, this has no meaning. And I remember we were going, you and me and John were like going to have breakfast. And I was like, I don't know that I can do this. This is so self-absorbed. And Shoshana made the comment. Shoshana did. Yeah, she was like, Chris, you're like a vessel for people getting to things that they need to get to that they can't get to on their own. And I didn't immediately buy into that, but it made me appreciate what I was doing. And yeah, I mean, over the years, I've had some pretty special experiences with people where they come up after one of the shows we've done and tell me about, these horrible things that they're going through, and then the music had become such a consolation for them through these hard times, and I've always felt like, I mean, this whole world's like, it's rigged for you not to feel anything. You're just supposed to put your head down, and you're vulnerable if you feel anything. You're weak. You're a loser. We live in a meritocracy. You're not supposed to have to be having a difficult time. So can't remember where we started with that, but that's like the impetus of what I do. I do at points want people to reach really deep into themselves and feel things, because there are bands that on a Friday night play in a bar, and after you've gone through all the BS of your job, you just want to go out and have a beer and cut loose. At points now, I think we're able to do that. But the other part of what we're doing is trying to get people to stop for a minute and feel what they need to feel. And I feel like we do that pretty well.
Yeah, I agree. Another thing that strikes me about how you do what you do is that there's definitely a narrative to your songs. There's definitely a storytelling. There's definitely a lot of visual in your songwriting, which I think it's interesting that you are a visual songwriter while also being a film and television producer. So you're very visual in a very auditory world. So tell me how you weave those two things together, if that's something that you have done intentionally, or it's just sort of where you've ended up because of your giftings are in that, or tell me how you weave those together.
Well, I don't.
Do you see the visual before you write the song, or does the song manifest the vision?
Okay, give me a minute to get to that.
Okay.
So in my past history of music that I listen to, among the country stuff, I'm a huge fan of Roger Miller.
Okay.
And he was a linear songwriter. He played with words. He was on speed, and it almost felt like a train wreck where it was going to fall apart, but it never did. And give me a second to put this together, because so I have a big respect for narrative songwriters in a linear tradition, telling a long story, but that's not necessarily my thing. I've done it before in some songs, but I really, and you're right about this, like I'm a visual type thinker. Like I see the spatiality of things. I see the sunlight. I see, I feel the temperature, I see the colors. And when I write, it's not necessarily linear. And a lot of times, most of the time when I write, if someone were to ask me the horrible question, well, what is that about? It's like, it's whatever you want it to be about. I don't want to talk about the meaning of a particular song. And so it is more of a visual way. I get a feeling, and then I start trying to match words to it. And hopefully I also have a melody that is helping me like put the words in place. And that's kind of how I operate. It's very it's sensate, it's about feeling your way in the dark and like finding these things, and all of a sudden you have this like kind of visual experience. And that is the way I write. I don't know. And it's not that I won't ever write a linear song ever again. It's just that's mostly where I concentrate.
There are, let me think where I was going to go after that. I just think it's so, it's beautiful to me the way that you write the narrative, and yet it's not just one long story that drones on and on like some very famous songwriters I know. It has a real hook to it. Many of your songs have just real hooks to it, and keeps people engaged. And then part of what's really interesting about Baptist General Stew is that several years into it, you brought the band down onto the floor with the audience, and that was pretty revolutionary. I thought I had never seen that happen. I had never seen, because you were at one point like just performing, and then at least at the show that I remember seeing it the first time, it felt like there was this internal dialogue that you had with yourself about I need to be with the people. They're what we're here for. That's how this is. I might be layering on top of it, but that's what it appeared to me. And you brought everybody down. Maybe not the drummer, because those are hard to move, but you brought everybody down, and then you started doing shows where you just set up in the middle of the room with everybody surrounding you, and it became this very communal experience where part of going to shows, you feel the music, you can, it's like a visceral experience as well as a spiritual, emotional experience. And with that, you almost allowed the audience members to become participants in your performance. Tell me, was that what you were intending? Was that what you were going for? What am I layering it on when I say that that's what happened, where it seemed like you're like, I want to be close to the people? Tell me why you chose to bring it down to the floor like that.
Well, I mean, we started out playing at house shows, and we were an acoustic band, completely an acoustic band. And I still, we have a rug. It's like a 12 by 12 foot rug that we put on the floor. And the drummer does come down with just a snare drum and brushes.
Oh, that's right.
And,
okay.
Yeah. And so for 2 or 3 songs, maybe at the end of a set or maybe in the middle of a set, we'll get off the stage and get on that rug, and we encourage people to get around us and shut up and like, hear something without a PA. And that's still a really special thing for us to like do with an audience, because it's very different than getting blasted decibels, from a stage, which often sound great, but at the same time, having like a quiet moment, with a few songs is like really important. It makes I think it makes it even more real, you know? I
Yeah.
think everybody's probably sat around a campfire sometime and your friend like pulls out a guitar and starts playing. And either you have like a real averse reaction to it or you have a real moment. And so, like, that's kind of, we've done that longer than you remember, Shoshana. We've at points we've done 100% just a rug show, not even
Hmm.
been hooked up to a PA.
Hmm.
And then other times then it's PA mixed with the rug show or whatever. It's really better with a smaller crowd.
Hmm.
You know,
Hmm.
uh, you get more than 200 people, it's just no doubt there's going to be some extraneous noise that gets in the way of what you're doing. So
You're right. So being an artist also has challenges that are unique to whatever the mentality or the heart. Tell me some of the challenges that you have faced, some of the obstacles that have presented themselves, some of the war of art that you have waged, and how you have battled them, fought
have you
them. What you're
have you read Stephen Pressfield's book, The War of
several
Art?
times,
Okay,
several
good.
times. Yeah,
I'm pretty familiar with it. It's a mantra, you know.
yeah,
Um, Alcoholism, you know. I
yeah.
developed I got really good at that stuff after my father died because I really wasn't that much of a drinker in college and in my 20s. My friends would drink an 18 pack and I'd have about 5 or 6 and be fine. Um, but after my dad died, I was pretty vexed by not understanding what death was about. I thought it was indignant. There was no lesson in it.
Mm,
And yeah, I mean, the way I coped with it was just bottles of wine. And it from the time I was 31, it just progressed and progressed and progressed and progressed. Uh, I'd, I'd have hills and valleys where I managed it some and then I wouldn't manage it. And then, yeah, in November of 2019, I finally just cut it on my life and went into recovery. And I'm still in recovery. I'm still experiencing things. I developed a way to deal with my anxieties. Um, I developed a schedule for myself. I've got tools now. You know, if I were to want to drink, I've got things that help me try to get out of that mode. And now I'm on to like the therapy. Like I went from like developing a method to not drink to like really having to dig into some personal stuff that the reasons that I started drinking.
yeah,
So I'm doing pretty good. I mean, I definitely was on a self-destructive path.
yeah.
And I don't feel like I'm on that now. And I had a lot of people that are around me that supported me until they didn't, you know, and then they told me they were worried about me. And I finally got to a place where I realized I had to have some help. So I don't
And
know.
and so has have you seen a difference in your writing since getting that help? Has the therapy opened you up for new creative experiences, or do you feel like, because there are artists that feel like they can only create art so long as they're messed up, so to speak, or they have problems, and then there are the other artists that feel like if they're healed and healthy and whole, that they've got nothing artistic to offer. I tend to not feel that way, but tell me what your experiences have been. Have you even, has there been a difference between your songwriting, maybe when you were drunk, and your songwriting when you're not? Have you,
Well, not to name names, but I used to go in the studio and record, and it's really not their fault. I don't know that I don't agree with them, but I would go into studios, record, and we start doing vocal tracks, and producer would say, hey, let's go get you some beer, or let's go get you some vodka. Because, I mean, my voice has always been a little bit wheels off, you know, and so I would do that. You know, the most interesting thing, I don't think my songwriting's changed at all.
Interesting.
Yeah,
But
I don't think the songwriting's changed. I know. So I got into recovery in November of 2019, and I had already booked Baptist Generals at a holiday thing in Arkansas, the Holiday Hangout, which is really awesome. Yeah, and I had a sponsor at that point, you know, in my recovery group, who's also a musician. And so I was like, man, I don't know how I'm going to do this, because I was rehearsing with myself and not being a little bit liquored up or lathered up. I couldn't hit the notes, like singing wise. It was like my voice.
Interesting.
My voice is gone. It's like, I don't know how I'm going to do this. And my sponsor, he went to Arkansas with me, and we did the show. And I was frightened to death because I was like, I just don't think I can hit this stuff, where I always used to have at least a couple double latkes before I'd get on stage, you know. And so it was definitely a fish out of water experience for me, where I was like, this is totally different, and it's something I'm going to have to adjust to. Now, what happened for the audience? Apparently, nobody knew I was struggling going through this. But yeah, that was the only thing. As far as like the thrust of like the music I write, that really didn't change, I don't think.
That's fascinating to me, because you hear a lot about how you need alcohol or other substances maybe to free your mind, to help you produce more, or to relax in front of an audience because of stage fright and nerves. But this is the first time I've heard that you used it as a way to free your vocals up, to reach places that you can't necessarily reach as easily when you're sober. That's fascinating.
No, it's the truth. I mean, no, it's the truth. You know, it was something where, I mean, yeah, and as I said, you know, to have a producer at 10 in the morning when we're starting to record vocals go, you need some alcohol. You got to loosen that up. I mean, that's the way I used to do it.
Interesting.
And I don't think at this point I've lost a lot of my range, but there was this critical moment where we were doing the show in front of a lot of people. And I was like, gosh, I don't know how the hell I'm going to sing, you know? But I don't seem to have a problem now.
So becoming sober, getting sober in November 2019, just before the pandemic happened, must have been its own challenge once everything shut down. What did you learn about yourself going through the pandemic and the lockdown in a sober state?
Well, I'm gonna tell you this much, and this is just to be upfront with people. And I don't, without, you know, I was part of the largest recovery organization in the country. I don't say their name because this is what it's supposed to be. We don't talk about it. I know most of you know who I'm talking about. But you know, this organization has a thing where you make it 30, 60, 90 days and you get a token, you know?
Yeah.
And my whole opinion of that, I really don't like the gamification of that. It's okay for me to have my opinion about it. I think it's a great organization. The things I do and I don't like about it. All of us that are amongst this group, we have the ability to like say, well, I like that, I don't like that, whatever. But, you know, I think if you're somebody like me that was like drinking 6 and 7 days a week, and you manage to make it 200 days without drinking, and you mess up for one day, I don't think that is a reason to go into like really dangerous, dark self-loathing for what, you know, I think that's stupid. I mean, there are people I've seen that have relapsed after a year, and it's almost like the relapse does more physical damage to them than the fact that they relapsed. It's just not, I don't think it's healthy. You know, this is a management situation that you work on, you know, your ability to stay off substances, and it's day to day. That's the way I feel about that. So the pandemic happened, and yes, it was really difficult. And I was amongst a lot of peers that fell off the wagon because, I mean, here we are. I mean, they fell off the wagon with it being completely transparent about it, going, I'm going to drink. And the rest of us, they go, this is horrible, you know, so I'm not going to tell you what to do, you know. And yeah, I had 3 people die this year, and I went off and bought a bottle of wine. And I would say since November of 2019, with all this pandemic BS, I've fallen off the wagon 5 times, you know. But I mean, the good thing is it's usually just a bottle of wine. It's not, it hasn't been days. That's usually what happens is somebody starts drinking and they don't stop. I had friends die, and I was like, screw it, I'm gonna go get a bottle of Cabernet. So anyway.
Well, it sounds to me like you learned a little bit of grace for yourself. If you reject the idea of slipping into self-loathing because of falling off the wagon, as you say, that sounds to me like you're practicing grace, and a deeper self-love than self-loathing. And for the record, I totally agree. Like, people make mistakes all the time. You don't teach your kids to fall into deep despair and hate themselves because they mess up. You teach them, well, now you're going to fix it and do better next time and move on and learn from it and all that stuff. And that sounds like what you're saying that you have done a lot of this year.
Yeah, well, I want to say that I don't think somebody should beat themselves up for failing, you know?
Right.
Especially when you're dealing with something that's been pretty much lifelong for you. I mean, my heavy drinking started around the time I was 30. I'm 52 now. So this is my life in a bar. It's very well developed over like 21 years, 20 years, 21 years. So, and then being a musician, half the time they want to pay you in alcohol, which is just ridiculous. But I don't think people should beat themselves up when they mess up. They need to be conscious of what they're doing. My issue is don't let this become like a regular thing you're willing to accept. Like, I don't want this to be a regular thing where I'm, oh, well, I fucked up for a day, you know, or that's not the goal. The goal is to not use substances, you know? So, yeah, I don't know what else to say about that, but it's the same thing I tell my friends. It's like, don't make this a routine for yourself where you're falling off the wagon, whatever. So,
can we talk about the retreat you just went on? Can you,
sure.
do you feel comfortable talking about that?
Mm-hmm.
So tell me about it. You went on a silent retreat nearby where you live. How did you discover it? Why? What did you have any profound experience? Did you learn anything about yourself? Like, maybe you like to talk? I don't know.
I don't mind talking about it. I mean, I'm almost kind of Gnostic in my spiritual faith. You know, I grew up in a household with an atheist and a charismatic Christian. And I don't understand how my parents ever got together. And my mother was fanatical. And during the later parts of their marriage together, she clung to religion more and more, and it got more out there as far as like an extreme inner spirituality and faith. Now, I'm a person who stayed away from 12-step programs because of the God thing for years. I mean, I probably could have gone in 2013, but I didn't want to deal with the God thing. And at the same time, I mean, I grew up, my dad being an atheist, I grew up reading Robert Ingersoll, who, before the, you know, 19th century, he was like the foremost atheist in 19th century America. And then Mark Twain was very outspoken about religion. And so I grew up reading these things, and my father was pretty much an atheist, although he laughed about it later when he was in terminal cancer. He's like, I might not be as much of a black, you know, I might be more of a, you know, backslid Baptist than I thought. But yeah, but my mother's, I love her to death. She's my mom. She's the only one I got. But I mean, historically, we just have different ideas of what faith is, you know. And I mean, I've told her to her face that, like, you know, you're this pious, judgmental church lady, and she won't disagree with it, which really messes me up. Okay, so you know this, and then you claim to know, like, Christianity, and you think that's okay, you know. I mean, I don't know, but I've always, so in recovery, I mean, I already started a practice of meditation in Buddhism like 7 years ago. And so I have kind of a Gnostic sense of like, I really don't want a church to get in the way of me having a relationship with whatever it is that I think God is. And so so it's taken me a long time to get to the point where I feel like at points I'm spiritually bereft. I don't think that comes through my music, because I always think that was like a vessel for me, you know, to have some kind of flesh and blood spiritual sense of what life is. But I definitely, like, I went to a Jesuit retreat center that's not far from here. Really wonderful people. Jesuits are an order that was established in the early 1500s in the Catholic Church. They have, the one thing I can say about the Jesuits, and a lot of people know the Jesuits from in the US, they believe in science, and they've created a lot of educational institutions. If you've ever heard of a school named Loyola, and there are like 50 colleges in the country that are run by Jesuits. But I don't like going to chapel and staring at classical sculpture. That doesn't do it for me. What does it for me is that property has several acres, and I probably, over 5 days when I was there, I probably walked 35 miles in the rain and in the sun, and then with a headband lamp at night through the woods. And I turn on Chopin. I have like a playlist. I turn on Chopin and I just listen to Chopin. And to me, that puts me in a spiritual place, you know, to have some moments. So, yeah, I don't know how else to describe that. Yeah.
Did you feel renewed, refreshed,
Absolutely.
replenished,
Absolutely.
rested? Anything that starts with RE, apparently.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
And their retreats they're really wonderful. They have an intensive schedule. You know, between your lunch, you know, then you go to these prayer meetings, and I don't mind the prayer meetings. There's often good lessons in what they have to say. I just don't want to sit in a chapel all the time. I really don't like, my idea of being with God does not involve an intercessor in the sense of churches think they have to be there, but that's how the whole racket got started. We used to have Gnostic spirituality where you had a close relationship with God, you know, and instead now it's institutionalized. And I really love those people at that retreat. They're very nice people, but I also have my own idea of what I'm here to do and all of that. So I don't know.
So there's a little scene in Anne of Green Gables. I'm gonna take it to Lucy Maud over here, where Anne first goes to live with the family and that she's adopted by, and the woman who adopts her wants her to pray, and she's like, well, I've never prayed. I don't know how to do that. And so the mother tells her, and she's like, I just feel like if I really wanted to commune with God, I just go lay in a field and just be with God. She says it a little bit more beautifully, but it just was, when I first saw that, I thought it was such a profound way of explaining prayer. It's more than just words that you speak. It's a visceral connection to the creator, or whatever you envision or visualize as God. And I think that my opinion is that as consumers of art, we're doing that a little bit. So where artists and musicians are the vessels, the audience is the recipient of that creation that flows. And then we're given back. We give out, and then we give back, and it's a cycle. But tell me what you're doing now, how you're doing now, what's next, what's coming up, what can people expect to see? You got anything in the works?
We've been recording songs.
Woo,
I mean, so that's going on. We're not putting out an album. We'll put them out a single at a time. And
on Spotify?
Yeah. I mean, we use a distributor that hits every one of the big, so you can get it wherever you get your music.
Okay.
But Stalin say that, like, you know, during the period of a decade, nothing happens, and then in the period of a week, a decade happens. You know, and there's just a lot of changes going on culturally and societally, and I really do think I'm not one of the optimists. I think we're in a place where people's politics have gotten in the way of them being able to relate with each other, and I don't know that any of this is over. But yeah, I know what I got to do for myself. But anyway.
So when do you expect, with all of that, when do you expect new songs to start showing up for people to catch? Or are you going to do any live performances now that things are opening back up?
We haven't even started doing live. We had a thing we were doing with public radio KXT. We were doing a drive-in movie and a live show in the parking lot, November of 2020, and it got canceled because the entire staff there we'd been working on it for 6 months with KXT.
Oh gosh.
Yeah, we were showing a drive-in film, and we were going to do 2 sets, one at the beginning and one at intermission. And it got canceled, because the whole staff got COVID, and so they were quarantined. So we're trying to do that in November again. We'll see what happens. But I mean, other than that, I mean, the stuff we're recording this summer should be out successively through the fall. We'll see how it works. Yeah.
Great. Well, thank you. That's all that I have. Is there anything that you want to add? Anything that I didn't ask you about that you want to dive into or
Not
dig
really.
up?
No.
Okay.
I don't think so.
Okay. Well, thank you so much. I think that this has been great. I've loved talking to you about how you paint the world through music, and your process and some of the not so easy parts. I appreciate your honesty and your transparency with that, because I think that there's, particularly with musicians, I've noticed male musicians, it's hard. And I think that
Now, wait a minute. Okay, so let's talk about that.
Okay,
I'm just
sure.
curious. I'm just curious. What do you mean by that?
Well, I mean that of the people in my life that have taken their own lives, they have been male and they have been musicians. There have been a number of other more well-known musicians who have taken their own life. They're always male. I'm sure it affects females, and I am sure that I know that it affects non-musicians as well. But in my world, where I've seen it, for some reason, and I haven't figured out the why yet, there is it's profoundly geared more towards male musicians. The struggle is there in deeper levels than I can understand. And I think that there's a lot of people that don't acknowledge it. I think, to speaking to what you spoke about earlier, where we're not really, in our culture, we're not really allowed, or we're taught that we're not ever supposed to suffer, and we're not supposed to feel any sort of pain and have a bad day. Everything is supposed to be just all copacetic. And I think that as a result, we lose our sensation, or we feel overwhelmed when we have them. And knowing that it's affected you in a way that where you've handled it with alcohol, you've had to dig out of that. Now you're digging up you're going to therapy, and you're doing it in ways that are maybe long-term healthier than alcoholism, which is corrosive on all kinds of levels. I think it offers a way out, a hope for other people who might be struggling. That's what I mean.
I get it. Okay. I don't disagree with you about all of that, And I mean, unfortunately, like, not just even just an artist community with males. It's a larger problem of young men not having a whole lot of direction. But yeah, I understand what you're saying.
Yeah.
I was just curious.
Well, no, it's great. I mean, I didn't really put that into context, so I think it's great for you to ask that question too. But I do appreciate your honesty, and I think it's important, because I think it affects more than those admit to it. So maybe somebody will take something from that and say, you know what, if he can do it, maybe I can too. Maybe
right.
I can go on a silent retreat and rediscover myself.
Right.
But thank you so much for coming on and sharing your story and your process and your evolution. I wish you all the best in 2021 on all those things that you're working on. I can't wait to hear the new songs, one at a time, slowly leaking them out to us, just enough to keep us interested. And I appreciate you opening yourself up to be a conduit to feel the things that some of us can't, or that we feel that we can't really put into words, and then because of that, we can't really process. So thank you for all your work that you do that affects those of us that you might not even realize that it affects in a deeply and profound way. I'll just speak for everybody, and when we say that we appreciate you showing up and doing the hard work and staying in it.
I'm in it. So
you're too far in it to turn back now. So you just gotta keep going.
Yeah, I just keep going. So yes, Shoshana, I really appreciate you having me on here. Thanks. Absolutely. Yes, great questions.
Oh, good. Thank you. I'm glad. And thank you to everybody who is watching. Thank you for joining us today. Thank you for coming along the ride with Chris Flemmons of the Baptist Generals. I will put all of his links that he has in the show notes, and please like and subscribe and follow me. I have a lot more to come in the coming weeks, a lot more great insight to some of the artists and how they balance the beauty of an artistic world with the challenges of the artistic world, with the everyday and all the things. So thank you for joining us, and stick around because we got more.